alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm your host, Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a returning guest to the show, Nicole Fanning. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Tim. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, it's great to have you back. You've got your book 2 out now, haven't you?
Yes, I'm so excited. It's the continuation of my Heart of the Inferno series, so we have, just more of Jackson and Natalie that we got in book 1, and I'm just super proud of it and excited for the readers to enjoy it as well.
Oh, so remind people what they can, what those books are called. Yeah, the first 2 books, the titles of the book, not the series.
Yeah. So the first one is Catalyst.
Yeah.
And that's the start of the series, and then the next one is called Ignite. And there'll be 4 books total. So we have Catalyst and Ignite that are now out, and coming spring of 2022, we will have Flashpoint, which will be book 3. So it's kind of funny, but it's like the 4 stages of a fire. Like you have
yes.
Catalyst, Ignition, Flashpoint, and the Embers. So those are the titles.
Awesome. You know, it's actually funny now that I think about it. There was not. I'm not saying you're not being original or anything, but originality is not something I place too much value on in the first place. So not too much. It's some people, like when I was a student, people would place a huge premium on originality. Some people, and I'm like, just tell a good story. You know, just write a good story. Yeah. But
I think if you get caught up in everything I do and say it has to be 100% original, you'll really struggle.
Absolutely.
Move forward. So as long as you aren't like 1 plagiarizing and 2, you're telling it in a different way. It's not always like about the actions that are happening, because like everything that your characters are doing has been done. Like
yeah,
they're fighting a bad guy, they're falling in love. Like those things are pretty common. It's how you tell it, and it's the story that you want to convey to readers, and how they read it too. So yeah,
and that goes double for titles though, because I was just thinking about your titles and how they're all the different stages of a fire. Because there was this other series, it was a podcast series by it was a fantasy series by Abigail Hilton that I listened to years ago now. I don't think her author name is even Abigail Hilton anymore. But anyway, that's what she put those books out under. And it was I think it was called The Guild of the Cowrie Catchers. This was an older. I was like a teenager. It was like pirates, and they were like all like part human, part animal hybrid creatures.
Oh wow, that's really cool.
And different kinds, right? But then they, but each one was, the first one was, I think, what was it? I knew it went like flames, embers, ashes, and maybe there was a 4th one. I don't remember. But yeah, there was kind of a phoenix theme to the whole series, so it was kind of a similar thing.
The 4 stages of the fire.
Yeah.
It has different words.
Yes.
Like different things. And for some reason, I fell in love with Catalyst. Is really what started it. I was like, oh, that'd be such a great name for a book.
Yeah.
And then from there, I was like, oh well, I really want this like bigger story to tell. So when I'm looking at this one model that I found, it had like Catalyst being like the 2 things that come into this, like something that comes into the situation changes everything, but then it's taken away. Like the catalyst doesn't stay. And then there's the ignition when like the actual flame like takes off. And then Flashpoint would be like the hottest point of the fire, like right before it starts to decay. And like I think they had the word decay on there was one of the terms, and I was like, I don't really like that word.
No, not necessarily for that kind of series.
Yeah, kind of just shifted it a little bit to make it sound good, but it was based off of the main 4 stages of the
yeah, more scientific. Yours is a more scientific vibe, and like you were saying, you just do it. It's a little differently than the one I was referring to before. It's just like, wow, it's been forever, and I just remembered that one series. Like, well, it was pretty fun.
But it is crazy that you bring that up, because that's something that you see over and over in books. Is everybody's trying so hard to be original, especially as a new author, and it's like, make your writing original. Like the story itself and what's going to happen, people are going to be drawn to that based on the way that you tell it. It doesn't matter if you had 2 characters that had the same romantic dinner in 7 novels, 7 different novels. It's the way you tell it that's going to connect with people. So obviously don't try to like take anybody else's material, but there are certain things, and I obviously I won't name names, but there's certain author that had admitted, like, I really liked this book series. And when you read her series, you can see little things that she pulled from that book series, but she changed it and crafted it in a way that made it unique in her own. And so it was kind of her way of paying homage to, or homage, I think it's homage, not
Homage, yeah.
Homage. But, just honoring that series and that book that moved her. So, there's a way to do it that's respectful.
Oh, absolutely,
and,
yeah.
Yeah, just make it your own.
Yeah, I mean, like, and that's the kind of thing that, I don't know why, but recently I've been thinking about, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. And then I'm like, what kind of spin would I put on that? Obviously be sci-fi fantasy, but then what else would I do? And it's that kind of thing. Yeah, and what other characters, how would I change those characters to make my own similar kind of idea? Yeah.
Yes, I am obsessed with, Sherlock Holmes and the writing that was there with, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And I just love what he created and the way he created it. He told the story, like, in a way that kept people drawn in. And then when there was the big reveals, it was like, oh, there were little hints all the way along. And I love those moments. So I've been very fortunate that I've had a couple of my readers that were like, I did not see that coming. And then when I read it again, I read the book for the second time, they were like, oh my gosh, you had it right there. It was right in front of my face. And I didn't see it because of the way it was crafted in there. And I'm like, wow.
Oh, that sounds a lot like actually my favorite novel. Well, two novels when you put them back to back, but they become one story. It's another one that ends on a little bit of a cliffhanger, you might say, which is on topic here. But Hyperion and the Fall of Hyperion by Dan Simmons. Like, the first one of those is pretty good, but then you put them but it's almost incomprehensible too. There's various parts I'm like, what the hell is going on here? This world is really steep. There's a lot going on.
Yep.
And then you put it all together, and after reading the first two books, you can go back and read it, and it's like, but not only is it easier to read, but it makes a lot more sense. But it's like, wow, it's not just because I know some of this stuff in advance. It really actually increases the enjoyment of the story. It's one of those ones. It's one of the few books that I've reread and really, really loved more.
That's what it is. I think I wanted a book that I could read because I felt that way when I had read, even Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. Reading them the first time, you retain it, but your brain can't retain everything because there's so much world building there, and you get it. And then when you read it again, it's almost like, what's going to happen, but you still pick up little things and little connections, and it's like you get like something special a second time. So that was really what I was hoping to craft. So, like, before I sat down to write any of these 4 books, I mapped out the whole plot. I mapped out all of the little hints, as I called them, the little Easter eggs that I was dropping through the books. And I have confidently told my readers that these 4 books will be canon for a 14-book Mafia-verse that we're creating. And everything that's in these books will be relevant to something else. So there is nothing that's just useless filler. There's always a reason that something is there. So I'm a sneaky author like that.
Oh, we love the being sneaky, don't we?
Yeah.
But then, but the other thing, I think that the key to being sneaky, at least in my experience, is to not worry about being overly sneaky. Again, it's just like, don't worry about being too original, but like, just say what you're going to say. A lot of the time, the reader just won't pick up the detail or won't pick up the significance until you make it really clear. If you just don't belabor a point, like, you can just keep using it until eventually it's like, oh, that's what he meant all along, or that's what she meant all along. Yeah.
Yep. There's the nickname, because like that was a big thing too, especially in romance books. Is like, it always seems that the guy always calls her baby or baby girl or something of that effect. And I was like, okay, I'll have him use those titles sporadically, but I wanted him to have like a name that he really just calls her. So I have that his heritage, the main character, his heritage is Greek. So he calls her Agapimenos, which is sweetheart in Greek. And so that became something like where he kept calling her that and she didn't know what it was. And so we're probably about 3/4 of the way through the book. She finally asks him, like, what is this? What do you keep calling me? And he tells her. And so that's like a nice little, little gift for the reader. So my fans were like, "Can we put that on a T-shirt?" I'm not there yet.
Not yet.
So,
No, maybe
but,
not.
Yeah, I
Not
love that. So I love little
Yeah.
Easter eggs and stuff like that, where it just feels good for a reread. I hope that my readers reread my books. You know, that's the greatest compliment to an author, is that you want to reread the books and share them, and so.
No, that's yeah. I mean, I hadn't been thinking about that much until recently, but then I've been rereading. It's not a reread because I've never actually read this volume before, but it's a later book. It's like one of the spin-off books after this trilogy. So it sounds actually a little like what you're doing with your mafia stuff, but it was Joe Abercrombie, his first Law trilogy. I read that a few years ago. That's dark fantasy for people who aren't familiar, but most people listening probably will be familiar with it because he's way more famous in the fantasy world than someone like little old me.
I haven't read it, but I've definitely heard his name. Like,
okay, yeah.
That name sounds very familiar to me.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal author. And I started reading one of the later books in the spin-off series of that called The Heroes, which is about a single battle in the fantasy world. The whole book. It's like a 700-page book. It's about one
battle.
It's like 3 days. Yeah, it takes place over like a week. Yeah.
That's amazing.
And it's just so nitty gritty and like all these points of view. It's a very epic book. But yeah, you were saying?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I created with Catalyst, the whole story takes place over the course of a week. And it was funny because like mafia romance is not usually a genre that has like a slow burn to it. But with my book, I was also not just wanting to create mafia romance. I wanted to create a mafia thriller romance. Because I didn't want to just market to like the female population. I wanted it to feel like a marriage of like a romance story with like a Stephen King, like James Patterson something. Like a book like that has some substance and a plot to it. So it was funny when my like hardcore mafia readers were like, I cannot believe that you had this slow burn happen over the course of a week. Like, I kept waiting for things to take off, and you kept like, denying me. And so yeah, it's really fun to see that happen, and have the connections there, and people develop a relationship with the story and the characters, and that. Again, greatest compliment to an author is when someone's like, I can't get Jackson Pace out of my head, or I want to be more like Natalie. And I'm like, me too. I'm not like her.
It's very much what I've been experiencing reading The Heroes, and it's kind of integrating the reading segment into the middle here, because The Heroes has a lot of characters that that are in the earlier series, but now they're point of view characters, or they're more important, or the old main characters aren't there anymore, or whatever, for various reasons. And I mean, there's some of these people that like, wow, and it's also been like a decade, like in the world time. It's been like 9 years since the events of the previous series, but it was such a weird thing to see. Like, oh wait, everyone's terrified of this guy. He was like a kid in the last time I saw him. He's like, now he's this one-eyed freak who everyone is scared of. It's like, okay.
It would be like the equivalent of taking like the Game of Thrones series
and
basically taking out, seasons 2 through 7 and just putting like the first season with all the characters in like their baby stage, right? Like little babies, and then in like the 8th season, like Sansa, Arya, everybody's terrifying. Like so much character growth. It's like boom. But you touched on something that I am trying to build with my 14-book Mafia series. Is like these 4 books right now, they'll be like the main, like the meat of the dinner, and they'll be canon, and then the characters that we've met in these books will be the main characters in other books in that 14-book series. So we won't ever get like a Jackson Natalie point of view again. We'll have other characters that are side characters in these novels will be the main character, and Natalie will be there, but they'll be side characters.
Yeah.
We'll get to see a different perspective and the way that they think, and I think it's very similar to what you were talking about. So.
No, absolutely. Indeed it is. I mean, it's also a cool feel. I mean, I know but it's kind of funny how they you can see it across a lot of different media too. I mean, but it's mostly it's kind of funny because you don't see it. I don't see it in movies a lot, partially because the way franchises in movies work. If you're gonna have the actor come back, you either have to like digitally age them up somehow or whatever, or use makeup or whatever, or you've got to wait like 20 years to make the next movie, and then often you're talking about a completely different team.
Right. But you do see it a lot with like, series.
Yes.
Series, it's a little bit easier to do that kind of thing.
Oh, like TV shows? Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. I guess now series is probably a better word anyway, like because now a lot of them aren't even on TV. Come on. Yeah. It's just my old brain.
Right? You see that there's a lot more popular series than there is like popular movies anymore. Like, have you seen this on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime or HBO? Like, those are becoming more popular than like actual big movies. So
yeah, it's interesting. But I was also going to say video games. There was one of these series of video games that they kind of did this, and there's at least one that I can think of that does this kind of thing, and that was honestly a series I've never actually played many games in, but it was Metal Gear Solid, which is like an espionage, kind of, but with crazy. Oh, you did? Excellent. I played a few of them. I've never actually beaten any of those games, but I really like the story in those games. And specifically the part where it's like, by the time Metal Gear Solid 4 rolls around, everything's completely different. And so, like this guy who's just a punk is now like a super ninja or something. Whatever. What are we doing here?
There was one, I can't remember the name of it, but like Assassin's Creed kind of does a really good job with that too, with like different characters, and they're all interconnected, and it like makes your brain hurt sometimes when you think about it all. Like, okay, that's awesome, but I loved like the ancient Greek one and the Egyptian one, and they did a really good job with all that stuff too.
Huh. Cool. Yeah, I'm not a huge gamer. I'm actually getting more into games, but never mind that. I think the next one on my docket's actually got to be The Witcher 3. I'm finally got to actually play one of those games.
I can't do any, like, Metal Gear Solid was probably as far as I could go. Like, I'm the person that, like, runs around in a circle with the gun.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm not good with, like, shooter games. But, like, stuff like Skyrim or, Assassin's Creed, when there's a lot more than just fighting, like, I'm good with that.
Yeah. It's kind of funny, because I think the last three-dimensional single-player game I really played a lot of was a shooter. And it was, I'm not sure if this would be up your alley. I always mention it because I really liked it. It was Fear. It's an older game, but First Encounter Assault Recon Fear was, it's like a horror shooter. It was like The Matrix meets The Ring. Like the
That sounds right up my alley.
Really? It was pretty tough to get to the end of it, and it is a pretty bone-chilling game at times. Yes. Let me put it that way.
Yeah. I really enjoyed Borderlands was another good one.
Oh, yeah. So you can play shooters. Come on.
I'm not good. So I have a cheater. I play in a cheat. What I do is I have my husband play the game all the way through and get, like, really good guns. And then he saves those guns in the game, and then
You go back and just massacre all these bad guys.
And come in, and I get to shoot guns, and, like, one big, like, a big guy will go down from one of my bullets, and I'm so excited.
That's funny. Okay. Yeah, that's smart, Hey, you teaming up on the game. Got to, beat it however you can.
With him, while he
I
love games that have like a storyline built in there too. Even like Uncharted or things like that, where they have like a full storyline built in. It's like watching a movie. Like, as the girlfriend of someone who games, you're just sitting there like, or wife, I guess I should say at this point.
At this
you
point,
just sit there and you're like, okay, so what happens next? Like, you want to know, like,
it's
that guy, so we can get to the next part of the story.
The funny thing is actually also a lot of games are more like TV shows. I think this is also or series because they are longer. They're like a lot longer than a movie, and there's more recurring kind of moments because it's a game and you're doing this. The player is doing the same thing all over and over. So, or similar things at least. So there's this definite parallel, and it's kind of an interesting how to get back to books though, how that's transformed the way people consume media these days.
Sorry, we're so off.
No, I don't mind. It's my show, and I would have cut you off. I would have turned it back as soon as I thought it wasn't fun. And now I'm just like, I just kind of have to. I kind of have to go back to books because we don't have a ton of time left. But I guess what I'm saying is that there's sometimes, I keep thinking about this one book of mine, Origin of Storms, which is it's a science fiction kind of I don't know. I wouldn't say it's a romance, but it's got romantic elements. Let me just put it that way. And it's also my longest novel. It's 180,000 words long. So
Oh
it's
my gosh, that is a long novel.
it's a big epic book. Yeah.
Big thick girl.
Exactly. It's a big beautiful book. It's
Ignite for me
triple
was
B's.
184,000 words. Like, I'll remember that forever. Ignite was 184,000 words.
Oh my god, that's actually even longer than wow, I didn't no idea.
Not by much, though. Not by much. If you were 180,000, you're right there.
Well, I was rounding up. It was 177,000, but whatever.
Oh, gotcha.
It's still a little, still significantly. That's a huge book. Jeez.
It's a big book. I had to change the font size to get it down because Amazon was going to make me make the book slightly bigger, and I do OCD for that. So I was like, all right, well, I'll shrink the font size down.
Oh, I hope. Yeah, that's funny. I mean, I would show you this one series here. I pulled my print copy of Origin of Storms over here, but because it's like 800 pages. It's just, and it's 6x9, 800 pages. Just this beast. Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, but that series though, it's kind of what we've been talking about though, because it's a journey. It's they're traveling through space in this weird pillar universe that I created, and so it's this big old fleet of ships. So there's a ton of characters. It's a huge epic story, but then. And the relationship stuff unfolds throughout this, but because they're going to different places like every 4 or 5 chapters, it seems like there's kind of this cycle that happens. So it's a little like a TV show in that way, or a video game with levels and stuff. Yeah.
Is it kind of like like a video game in the sense that like they're going different places and they have to like do something when they get there, or like?
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily go that far, but I mean, because like because the different stuff happens. But it was more abstract. It's more like there's this cycle. It's not like they're doing the same thing every time. It's not quite that gamey. Yeah.
That's cool. That's really cool.
But I really, even though, and also because my main character in that book is a medic for the fleet, so she's always a little bit out of her depth because she's not even really trained to be a medic. She just kind of signed on for it as a volunteer.
My female main character, she's a nurse. And she hooks up with, Mafia Don.
Yep.
They're constantly getting shot up. And there's a line in the third book that's coming out where, they're helping one of their men that has been shot and injured, like, recover. And she's like, honestly, because they have this big house, right? He has this huge generational Mafia Don. It's been like his grandfather was, great-grandfather was, and it's always been passed down. And so they have this huge, like, sprawling mansion, and in the mansion, she's like, maybe we should just make one of these rooms, like, a permanent hospital wing, because of how many, like, bones and limbs have been sewn, put back together here. So. Wow,
I laugh, but that is positively gruesome. I mean, just the thought of it is like, oh, yeah, nasty.
Yeah.
But, hey, also pretty cool. I mean, come on. Who doesn't need what self-respecting Mafia Don wouldn't need some hospital wing if their people are always getting shot up?
No, definitely. I mean, like, and it's kind of cute because in, like, the first book, like, they keep trying to, like, get together, and I don't let them get together until, like, the last, like, 10 chapters. Like, so it's, like, the last quarter of the book. And she's, like, he's injured, he's been shot up and everything, and she's, like, tending to him, and somehow in that process it becomes, like, an intimate scene. And I remember, like, when my dad read it, because when my dad read the book, I was like, Dad, just skip chapter 35, please. And he didn't, and he read it, and he was like, I'm really torn, because I don't know if, like, a hard-trained nurse would actually allow that kind of activity to happen while she was sewing him back together, and he had all these open wounds, and I was like, it's fiction. We're going with it. It was interesting and fun, and I was trying to be original.
Absolutely. I mean, hey, it's not. I mean, it still sounds great to me. Honestly, it sounds like an awesome part of a story. To be fair, I mean, I should check that book out. It's just that I just need to be aware next time it goes on sale, because honestly, I'm such a cheapo. I'm just a cheapskate when it comes to my ebooks.
Definitely.
I'm like, and I mean, you charge what you have to, what you want to. It's just funny. It's like, yeah, I got to be on the lookout for the sales because I'm thrifty.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, it's tough because when I did the paperbacks, Amazon makes me charge a certain dollar amount because of how big, especially like, I don't know, like if people can see this or if it's...
No, they can't. This is audio only, but yeah.
Yeah, but like, because it's so big,
Yeah.
They made me start at a high price point because I was like, oh, I'll keep it the same price as Catalyst. So the same price. They wouldn't let me.
No, I hear that.
Yeah. And I'm like, all right, well, that kind of sucks. But
yeah, what people just gonna have to live with it. They get more book for their bang, or whatever.
I'm also really bad that like my husband always yells at me. But if someone reached out to me and was really interested in reading it, like I would definitely see what I could do to help them get the story. Because as a writer, and this,
it's true. Yeah,
you want people to read your stuff. We want to be storytellers. That's why we're in this. That's why we do what we do. So.
Yep, definitely. I mean, if somebody private messages me and says, "Can I read one of your books and give it a nice review or whatever, or see it, or give it an honest review," even, I'd be all over that. Provided, at least I say that, but provided you're not asking for money as well. Like, I'm not going to pay you to read my book. Sorry, but you don't. But you won't necessarily have to pay me to read my book if you can offer me. Your attention, that's good enough for me. But I've received a lot of spam, especially on Instagram for some reason.
Yes.
By people who are like, for $15, I'll read your book and review it. I'm like, sorry, I can't pay everybody who asks me to read the book. No, this is just not how it works. Yep. Refer to them to the old Michael Stackpole writing advice. Money flows to the author, not from the author. Yep, books flow from the author, money comes back. Yeah,
he's like, you gave away another book? You gave away... I'm like, I do, I'm sorry. But I did have someone on Instagram that reached out for the same thing. And, I started on TikTok. I was very fortunate to, find my people on TikTok. And my fans have actually made the series a success just, on their own. So, really, I owe them all the credit. So... I had someone that reached out to me and said, hey, I have this friend. She'd really like to read your book, but, money is an issue. And I was like, absolutely, I will do what I can. And so, like you said, if someone reaches out and they genuinely want to read the story, even if they're not promising, a good review.
Yeah.
They just really interested. I love Mafia Romance. I want to read the story. I'm a sucker, and I will always do that. And probably shouldn't, but, again, I'm here to tell stories, and knowing that people enjoyed them is, all the consolation I need, even though my bank account would say otherwise.
Absolutely,
really
yeah.
And you can say this too, because you're self-published too. We don't really make that much money on our books.
not per volume, that's for sure. I mean, I know a lot of people who move a lot of books, and and people can definitely make it here. But one book is not going to break the bank. That's the main thing. I mean, especially not for. So, if you're making between 30 cents and $7 a book, you can give one away every now and then.
Absolutely. That's usually my reasoning, too, is, it's also just word of mouth. If that person knows that you did something for them and they're like, oh, I read this good book. So as long as, the content is there and the story is there, it's an investment. You're investing in yourself and your readers. And at the end of the day, I hope that, to be seen as someone who's generous when we can be. So that's what we're here for.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And in fact, also there's the semi-selfish fact that more people read it, the more people you give it to. It's one of those things that's what I've noticed. You're pretty much saying that as well. But the more people who have the book, it's the more people are going to see it.
Yep.
and the more people are therefore going to go read it. Yeah. Exactly. And so I rarely give away print versions because I'm a cheapskate. But ebooks, those don't cost me anything to distribute. That's free stuff, basically, that I can just hand people if I need to.
And it's your stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
It's your stuff. You wrote it. You made it. It's your baby.
And though I will
say the baby.
Not the baby part. No, we don't give away babies, not anymore. I mean, there were definitely people who used to do that, but I don't think it's I think that's frowned upon these days. Anyway, I guess one last thing here I wanted to say though is that I want to caution people to make, because you said this, but as long as the book's there, right? Because I definitely have made this mistake of releasing the book before it was fully baked, and then I had to go back and cook it again, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And it was fine, and I've done this actually quite a few times, twice. I've done it twice. I released a book that wasn't really ready for prime time, and both times I fixed it up, and now one of them is being released serially on Vella, and the other is out and doing well. I mean, people like it. Got 2 new reviews recently. I'm like, wow, both 5 stars, huh?
Yay!
Well, ratings. Yeah. But it was like, yeah, and that's Demon Scroll, and I've got to say, people who've read Demon Scroll before, who read the initial release of Demon Scroll, I've always have to apologize to them. So there's my mea culpa. Because it's always, it was such a rush job as far as the editing goes. The story was all there, but the editing needs to be there too, or it's just not going to be the experience people will need to get from a book like that.
It was such a lesson with like book one, because I was brand new and didn't really know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And so I wrote it, and like as the writer, you know, you don't want to inconvenience anybody, you know, so your friends read it and you read it and you're like, I don't need to hire an editor, or I don't need to invest in a proofreader. I'm just going to read it a bunch of times and I'll find all the errors. But what I learned with that is that as the writer, knowing what should be happening or how you wanted it to, like what you wanted it to say, sometimes words just aren't there and your writer brain inserts them. And
yeah.
So it was, I think my biggest issue with Catalyst was missing words. So when we released Ignite as the second book, I had an editor, you know, I had my proofreader, I had my ARC team that was catching things, and it was by far a better book. Like, everybody just said, like, one, like, it's not just the story, it's a better book. Like, it's easier to read, because when you have those errors and things like that, you said it's not fully baked, it can pull people out of the story, and once they're, like, pulled out of the story, you risk them not wanting to story. So, when I saw that, I had my editor go back and beef up Catalyst. So, Catalyst is fixed and all that, but it definitely was a learning opportunity, and, you know, advice to new writers, always, you know, at least hire a proofreader. At least have someone that isn't you editing your books.
And that's my sage nod for the evening. But yes. And so Nicole, where can people find your stuff? And thanks again. This has been great. Thanks for being on the show again.
Absolutely. I always love coming to chat with you, Tim. This is such a blast. We just go all over the place and we find our way back. It's beautiful.
Absolutely.
People can find me. I'm on Instagram and TikTok. Instagram, I'm author Nicole Fanning. Facebook, I'm just Nicole Fanning. And TikTok, I'm just Nicole Fanning. So I was lucky enough to get that username. And then I have a website, which is herownwords.com. And my books are available on Amazon and Kindle.
Well, awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. And as to this podcast, you can find us at mentalcellarpublications.com. My books are available. Well, you can find them all on Amazon.com right now, but definitely you can check out the big old list at timneaterwriter.com/books. And of course, then there's the 10 Vela serials that I've going because I've gone cuckoo, and that's on timneaterwriter.com/serialized-fiction. Thanks for listening, everybody. And stay safe out there. And I will talk to you again next week. Thanks for listening.
That tears it.